True prayer is not found in words but in the quiet surrender of the heart. It is when you stop trying to impress God and simply show Him who you are. When you come before Him without pretense, your soul begins to breathe again. God listens not to the perfection of your sentences but to the truth of your emotions. Prayer is the gentle art of unveiling your soul and allowing God's love to shape your thoughts. Please subscribe to my channel for daily God messages. Prayer is not a performance. It is an intimate conversation between the Creator and His creation. It is the language of humility, spoken not through lips but through a surrendered heart. You do not need to say much, only to mean what you say. When you pray with authenticity, every heartbeat becomes a word, and every tear becomes a verse. In those moments, heaven moves closer to you. To pray is to step beyond the noise of the world and into the whisper of eternity. It is a sacred act of trust, a letting go of control, and a declaration that God's wisdom is greater than your understanding. Real prayer is not recited. It is released. It is not memorized. It is felt. When you open your heart fully, your spirit begins to align with divine will, and peace descends like a gentle rain. Prayer is the mirror of the soul. When you come before God with your fears, your doubts, and your hopes, you reveal what truly matters within. It is not about saying the right things but about being real in His presence. True prayer allows God to reshape your heart so that His light can enter. In prayer, you are not informing God, you are transforming yourself. When you pray, do not worry about eloquence or rhythm. God does not measure the grammar of your prayers. He feels the pulse of your sincerity. Each genuine prayer is a bridge between heaven and your heart. When you open yourself with honesty, something sacred unfolds. Your burdens lighten, your spirit renews, and your faith deepens beyond words. Prayer is not repetition. It is revelation. It is the act of stepping out of your human limitations and resting in divine love. It asks you to bring your true self, the broken, the unsure, the hopeful, and lay it before the one who understands it all. In that surrender, miracles begin silently within you. God meets you where your words end and your heart begins. Real prayer is not about what you ask but about what you offer, your attention, your gratitude, your openness. It is not a formula. It is a relationship. When you quiet your mind and turn inward, God speaks softly, reminding you that you are never alone. True prayer transforms not your circumstances first, but your perspective, making you see divine meaning even in the ordinary. Every prayer whispered in truth rises beyond sound. It becomes energy that heaven recognizes. You do not pray to inform God. You pray to align yourself with His plan. When you pray sincerely, you open a sacred channel where grace flows freely. The power of prayer lies not in what you say but in how deeply you mean it. Prayer is the breath of the soul. Without it, we live but do not truly feel alive. It is through prayer that you connect with divine peace, and through silence that you hear God's reply. When you let go of structure and allow your emotions to speak, your prayer becomes real. It becomes a meeting place where your human weakness touches divine strength. Praying with a sincere heart means allowing your soul to speak even when your words fail. It is not about sounding holy but about being humble. Prayer is where you expose your truth before God and let His mercy embrace you. When you allow your emotions to flow in prayer, God reshapes your pain into peace and your worry into wisdom. Prayer is not confined to a specific place or time. It happens wherever your heart remembers God. When you pray, you connect heaven and earth through faith. True prayer is not a request, it is a reunion. It reminds you that you are seen, loved, and guided even when the world feels silent. In every genuine prayer, God answers with comfort, even if not in words. To pray deeply is to strip away all performance and pretense. It is not about reciting the words of others, but about revealing your own truth. In prayer, your tears are not signs of weakness. They are language too sacred for speech. God does not ask for perfection in your prayers. He asks for presence. That is where miracles are born. When you kneel in prayer, let your heart speak louder than your tongue. God hears what the world cannot. True prayer is not about how long you pray, but about how much of yourself you give in that moment. It is a release of fear, a confession of faith, and a bridge to the eternal. In the quietness of real prayer, your heart learns to trust again. Prayer is a sacred dialogue, not a monologue. It is listening as much as speaking. When you stop forcing words and start feeling the presence of God, your spirit begins to rest. You realize prayer isn't about changing God's mind. It's about allowing Him to change your heart. That quiet transformation is the real answer you were seeking all along. You can recite 1,000 prayers and still feel empty if your heart is not in them. But one whisper of sincere faith can move mountains. True prayer has no script, it flows from honesty. When you open your heart fully, even silence becomes prayer. It is there that divine love finds you and fills the spaces words cannot reach. Prayer is a sanctuary of truth. You don't have to pretend or hide anything from God. He already knows your pain, your joy, and your longing. What He desires is your willingness to trust Him. When you pray with openness, you become lighter. In that divine exchange, your worries dissolve, and peace enters silently. Real prayer is when you no longer perform but participate in love. It is not about saying the right thing, it is about being in the right spirit. God does not measure prayers by length but by depth. Every humble prayer is heard, and every tear is counted. When your heart bows sincerely, heaven bends with compassion. Prayer is the language of surrender. It begins where human strength ends. You pray not to escape reality but to see it through God's eyes. In those moments of truth, your faith expands beyond fear. God listens not for formality but for feeling, for the quiet courage in your voice that says, "I still believe." To pray is to return home to your own soul. It is where you face yourself honestly and meet God without a mask. You don't need perfect words. You only need an open heart. Prayer becomes powerful when it's honest, even when it's messy. That is where divine healing begins. Prayer is not asking God to follow your plan. It is asking Him to align you with His. It's a sacred act of humility that frees you from anxiety. When you pray sincerely, you step out of your mind and into your spirit. You begin to see that God has been waiting patiently, not for your words, but for your surrender. Prayer is where your spirit finally exhales. It is not about how strong your faith appears, but how honest your heart feels. When you stop rehearsing words and start revealing your truth, something divine awakens within you. In those moments of quiet surrender, God touches the parts of your soul you didn't know needed healing. Prayer is not about convincing God. It's about remembering His love already surrounds you. When you pray from your heart, your words become wings. They rise beyond sound, carrying your hope to the heavens. True prayer is not about begging. It is about belonging. It is an acknowledgement that you are never separate from the one who created you. Even when you have no words, your silence becomes sacred music in God's presence. Prayer is the heartbeat of faith. It keeps your connection to heaven alive, even when life feels heavy. When you pray sincerely, you release control and trust that God's timing is perfect. It's in that act of surrender that peace begins to replace anxiety. Prayer doesn't always change your situation immediately, but it always changes your spirit first. You don't have to pray perfectly for God to listen. He hears you in your pauses, your sighs, your unspoken worries. The language of prayer is not always words. It is emotion, energy, and intention. Every time you turn your heart toward God, you are praying. And in that moment, His light begins to move quietly through your life. Prayer is not about how loudly you speak, but how deeply you feel. It is not the voice that moves God, but the honesty behind it. When you open yourself in faith, you create space for divine wisdom to guide you. Each prayer you whisper becomes a seed of peace planted in the soil of eternity. It will bloom when the time is right. To truly pray is to let your soul breathe before God. It's when you allow your walls to fall, your fears to surface, and your heart to be seen exactly as it is. In that vulnerability, divine strength enters. Prayer does not always remove your struggles, but it gives you grace to face them. It teaches your heart how to trust when logic fails. Prayer is the art of slowing down enough to feel God moving. It is not about persuading Him, but about aligning yourself with His higher rhythm. When you sit in stillness and breathe His presence, your heart begins to soften. You begin to see that prayer is less about asking and more about remembering. You are already loved, already guided, already enough. Every sincere prayer leaves an imprint on the unseen. Even if it feels unanswered, it transforms your energy, your mindset, and your heart. Prayer is where your pain finds purpose, and your confusion finds clarity. It's a sacred exchange. You give God your worries, and He gives you His peace. Nothing is ever wasted when it is prayed over. Prayer is not a task. It's a relationship. It grows deeper the more honest you are. When you come before God with your true feelings, even your anger or doubt, you are still heard. He does not turn away from your pain. He meets you in it. Every prayer, no matter how raw, becomes a thread that ties your heart closer to divine compassion. The most powerful prayers are often the simplest ones, those whispered with trembling lips but steady faith. Prayer is not about saying everything right. It's about meaning what you say. When your heart bows before God, even in silence, He listens. In that sacred quiet, you begin to feel what words could never express. That you are held, understood, and loved without condition.